Netflix's Cam is the horror genre's latest feminist nightmare. Cam is the feminist nightmare fuel your next girls' night requires. Netflix original movie Cam is the sex-positive horror wait, what? Netflix premiered its original movie Cam on its streaming service on November 16, 2018. In the months that followed the film's release, my Twitter timeline was overrun with headlines like this. In general, I take issue with clickbait titles like this, not only because it muddles the SEO of certain words that should be used a little more sparingly, but because the usage of the word in the article that follows is generally lackluster. In Peg Alloy's review of Cam, titled The World of Sex Work as Cam Sees It, she laments the negative depiction of sex work and its implications for the female lead. She writes, "I wanted to see this well-made film as a feminist text, and it is on many levels. But the intersection with the horror genre makes such a criticism problematic. I think the story could have been every bit as suspenseful, even more so, if the explanation for Lola's hijacked account and an apparent double was explained somehow. To have this exist as a mystery thing no one can explain doesn't serve the film's already compelling baseline story of a fiercely independent and inventive performer who gradually realizes that the system that made it so easy for her to excel in this business utterly fails her when things go wrong. As well, her exposure to her family and community brings feelings of shame and rejection, a complete contrast to the validation, adoration, and praise she gets from her online fans. I wanted to see Cam as a story of courage and creating an identity and striving for empowerment, and indeed it is that on some levels. But its ending felt like a reminder that women who choose to work in the sex industry often feel defined by their choices and forced to remain there. Despite there being more opportunities than ever for women to obtain some autonomy in this industry, Cam serves to remind viewers that there is a cynical conundrum at work." Now that first sentence was what really caught my eye in this review. I wanted to see this well-made film as a feminist text, but the intersection with the horror genre makes such criticism problematic. I found this take really interesting, and it sort of opened my eyes to what bothered me about all the hot takes I had read previously. In the name of boosting the article's SEO, the people behind them sometimes oversimplified what could have been a more interesting interpretation of the film. Alloy unwittingly displayed what I had been frustrated about, the fact that feminism was being used flippantly and in a way that felt detached from the film's horror and suspenseful elements, as if the film's genre was a detriment to the overall quality of the film and its protagonist. Feminism is a perspective, not a stamp of approval. You can't label something feminist or not feminist the way that you would describe something as good or bad. A work can't only be considered feminist if nothing bad happens to the women in the story, and likewise, you can't write off a story that depicts a reality in which women are mistreated or objectified, aka our reality. This sort of black and white thinking is not conducive to film, literary, or any other critique, and you're basically stuck with a theoretical framework that depends entirely on whether or not woms are present. You can't just say the word sex positive and call it a day. Now you might be thinking, Percy, you think that you can do better? Well, I've got an English degree that I'm not doing anything with, and a YouTube channel that nobody watches, so I'm gonna try. For starters, never say that such and such is a feminist work, or ask if such and such can be considered a feminist work, because as we just talked about, that's not how a critique works, and it severely limits your ability to break down the elements of the work to better understand it. Feminist film theory, in particular, is an examination, not an interrogation. Instead, when you're arguing for the feministness of a work, ask, was such and such character well written? Were the women in this universe portrayed realistically? And were the women of this universe portrayed respectfully under the rules of said universe? Let me explain this in a roundabout sort of way. The feminist or not feminist flavors of J.R.R. Tolkien's work has been hotly contested since he was first published. The biggest point of contention is the fact that the story takes place in a fantasy world where a patriarchal structure is in place and very few important characters are women. However, it's been argued that the way that Tolkien writes women such as Galadriel, Arwen, and Éowyn adhere to Marian themes of spiritual strength, chivalrous themes of steadfastness and purity, and in the case of Éowyn, Viking and Germanic attributes of victory in a heroic setting. That was actually the thesis of my final paper in my Tolkien class in college. I got a B on it. To reference someone smarter than me, we can turn to Nancy Enright's critical essay, Female Power in Tolkien, where she says this: Éowyn and the other female characters in Lord of the Rings are crucial to the meaning of the tale. The Lord of the Rings is far more than a story about battle and adventure in the external sense, where those with the greatest physical prowess prove to be the victors. The Lord of the Rings is an illustration of various choices regarding the use of power, but with only one of them showing to be the best, the ultimately good choice. Arwen, Galadriel, and Éowyn, by the end of the tale, all make this good choice by opting for the Christ-like power of love, healing, and gentleness. The themes of a work don't work against an interpretation of a female character or of your feminist critique. Instead, they go hand in hand. In the same way that the fantasy genre doesn't complicate our view of Tolkien's work, but provide insight, the horror genre doesn't make a critique of Cam problematic. Instead, it gives us another angle to examine the work. So in Cam, what are the rules of the universe? They're similar to those of the primary universe, the one that we live in, but with horror elements mingled in, i.e. the mystery of what's taking the place of the Cam girls. Women are objectified, hence Alice's entire livelihood, and the portrayal of that livelihood is shown to have both positive and negative elements. Let's say we want to write about the movie's depiction of sex work from a sympathetic light. The movie has moments of Alice butting heads with the other Cam girls, shows her being talked down to by the police, and being laughed at for her job by her brother's friends. If you are writing an essay, an article, whatever, remember that genre enhances your thesis. So it might come out something like this. In Isa Mizet and Daniel Goldhaber's horror film Cam, the audience is introduced to Alice, a Cam girl who must rely on her skills and wits to overcome a mysterious online imposter. Like the crafty Hitchcock blondes and the headstrong final girls before her, Alice refuses to be a passive victim in a world that leaves her with little help. But then you have the other side of the conversation, the one that Peg Alloy is part of, which believes that the film is not a positive one, or at least could have done better for its female character. Let's look at what she wrote again. I wanted to see this well-made film as a feminist text, and it is on many levels, but the intersection with the horror genre makes such a criticism problematic. I wanted to see Cam as a story of courage and creating an identity and striving for empowerment, and indeed it is on some level, but its ending felt like a reminder that women who choose to work in the sex industry often feel defined by their choices and forced to remain there. Cam serves to remind viewers that there is a cynical conundrum to work. Her body paragraph is perfect, but her thesis statement needs some work, so let's retool what she said into a new sentence. While the film shows examples of Alice's personal empowerment through her career, such as being able to afford expensive furniture, overall her experiences are negative. She is made to publicly feel ashamed of her career choice, and even after she defeats her foe, she returns to being a Cam girl, a sort of hopeless reflection of the cyclical life of a sex worker. But then, you add the horror element to enhance your argument. In the same way that Hitchcock blondes are made victims in the end and the scream queens of the 80s are left to fend for themselves, Alice stands alone in a world that does not protect her, against a foe she never truly understands. Notice how I mentioned Hitchcock blondes in both statements and argued for them as both positive and negative figures. I did this to demonstrate what we've been talking about, that a critique, feminist or otherwise, is an argument of what the viewer interprets, not a simple yes or no. Movie reviews, essays, articles, all of them are part of a cultural conversation that anyone can be a part of, because each person has a unique perspective. So in conclusion, is Cam a feminist horror film? That's a trick question. Because a feminist critique isn't a stamp of approval, it's a tool, a means of observation, and as much as I know I can't stop people from using feminism as a star sticker on a work that deserves a much more thorough look, I can always seek out people who want to be a part of that conversation, hear different points of view, and never have to limit myself to the simplicity of a clickbait title. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.